and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking, reporting from the flight deck on TransMedics Group, a company which recently purchased an airline for $20 million in order to help them facilitate organ transplants in a more logistically effective manner. The stock is currently hovering around $170 a share at its all-time highs, but is it more blue skies ahead, or are we in for turbulent times? Join me as we delve deeper into this company, and I wish you all a pleasant flight. In my last video, when we spoke about TransMedics Group, I gave a solid overview of the business, explained exactly what they do, the mission that they're trying to tackle, and the market that they're trying to grow in. And I sort of drew some parallels between them and Intuitive Surgical, because when you've got these medical device companies that have spent 20 years making a massive product that is heavily patented, FDA approved. It's the only one of its kind that's FDA approved. Heart, lungs, and liver. And they're literally saving lives by the tens of thousands. This is a company to look into further. So what we aim to do in the next 5 to 10 minutes is we're going to discuss a little bit more about their total addressable market, trying to understand their growth, where they're headed in the future, looking at valuation, and finally, I will reveal if I'm buying any shares of TransMedics stock today. So the first thing to say is that TransMedics Group do have a few key long-term tailwinds that should really help the business. Number one, there is an aging population, particularly in the developed world. Most of the markets that TransMedics Group is FDA approved in, so US, Canada, basically the EU and Australia, we have an aging population. All these countries are also very rich, so that's going to translate to more revenue per person because the countries can afford the very complex and very expensive, we'll get into that in a minute, health devices that TransMedics provide. Now, so that's a tailwind. You've got an aging population, you've got people where the ratio of their total life to health life is actually quite high. And what does this mean? You've got less people dying overnight from heart attacks, overnight from infections, as many people did before we had the same modern medicine that we do today. And you've got a lot of people that they're living to 90, they may need a heart transplant at 70. They may need a lung transplant at 80. And you've got this kind of situation where the total number of transplants is on the rise. Like, look at this. This is number of organ transplants in the US. And I see that kidney is the most common one. TransMedics Group don't actually bother with the kidney. But you can see from this data over, 32 years, if you look at the purple and the pink and the blue, which are the three that TransMedics focus on, they're all on the rise, particularly the liver, which is where TransMedics are really taking off. Yeah, unfortunately, some people drink a lot of alcohol and the liver is an organ that needs to be protected a lot. So that is one really big catalyst for them. Also, more people are signing up to be organ donors. There is actually now a significant percentage of the US population that are signing up to be organ donors. So as that gets more common, because it's someone's autonomous right to say someone else can use my organ, right? And we should all respect that. But more people are understanding the benefits, more people are signing up. That's a tailwind for TransMedics, meaning organs can be used. And also, this is something that I'm going to show you in the total addressable market in a minute. More organs could be transported with TransMedics Group. So we're going to go over to the spreadsheet. I'm going to explain exactly what I mean. The third thing is that whilst there are only so many organ transplants that go on today, and I was a little bit worried about that when I was really thinking about the TAM deeply, which we're going to go into now. TransMedics Group could facilitate more, meaning that there's only been so many transplants done with cold storage, but TransMedics are actually facilitating an environment to get more transplants done than could ever be done before. So instead of just TransMedics effectively replacing the legacy cold storage technology, they're also meaning that more transplants could be done, which is both better for TransMedics as a company and the world as a whole. I was just about to take you through my spreadsheet and I found this crazy stat, which is that the percentage of organ transplants that actually need to be done compared to the ones that are actually carried out globally, the stat is only 10 to 20%, meaning 80 to 90% of people die either because there aren't enough organ donors or the donation can't be facilitated properly. And even in the US, that number that is successful is still only 30 to 40%, meaning 60 to 70% of the organ transplants can't actually be done. So you've got tens of thousands of people dying in the US every year because of this problem. And a big component of that is cold storage, right? Like, it's good for both TransMedics and the world that the number of organ donors are on the rise, but a lot of it is just because sometimes the limitations of cold storage kick in. You know, the organ, as I said in the last video, a heart and a lung can only survive for 4 to 6 hours within cold storage. And for a liver, it's not much longer than that. TransMedics machines can keep these organs alive for so much longer because the machine literally emulates a human body. So this is exactly what we're trying to solve. I'm going to show you the potential total addressable market for this stock. Okay, so the first thing to say about this model is I have basically based it off the US because most of TransMedics' concrete revenue and where they're actually operating as a company, it like almost like completely freely, like the whole country is adopting it right now, is in the United States. The first thing to think about is exactly how much these organ care systems cost. The actual machine is actually crazy, but the estimation I've got here is $250,000. I found this from a couple of different sources, one of which actually being the NHS back in 2016. So they were estimating the cost of it, and it seems like the average cost of actually a medical facility purchasing one of these machines is $250,000, right? That's crazy. That shows you how much value. But this is what's really interesting as well, and this is what I didn't quite quantify last time, is for a single use case, like for example, all of the little parts that have to be replaced, all of the fluids, all of the bloods, all of these really complicated, intricate medical things that the vast majority of us don't actually understand. Because this is a heart, like this heart was perfectly designed to be functioning inside my body. And everything is extremely delicate. So with all those intricacies, there is a lot of costs that for a single use case need to be replaced with TransMedics Group. That also includes the cleaning and the preparation, etc. TransMedics Group, they actually make an estimated 50,000 of all of these single use parts, which is crazy. And then a reasonable estimate for logistics and transportation is around about 30,000. Right, so the flights, like getting the organ there, finding the correct match, because that's the thing, is that not every person will be matched to every person. For example, my blood type is O positive, right? I can only receive a heart from someone else who has the blood type O positive. Otherwise, it's not going to work, and my body would reject the heart. So you've got these kinds of issues going on as well. You've got some people with very rare blood types that could only accept the organ from other people with rarer blood types, is right. So you've got this going on. So this is basically where TransMedics are making their revenue. Most of it is from products, so selling the machines, but they've also got service revenue as well. So this is what I'm saying. In the United States, right, there should be, there is demand for 40,000 transplants. That's heart, lungs, and liver. If you actually look at the figure of what is needed, it's probably about 100,000 or maybe slightly over 100,000. And that's because obviously kidney makes up a lot of it, but TransMedics are not focusing on kidney. The actual number that gets done for these three is only 18,200 because there is a mismatch, like because 60 to 70% of them, there's excess demand, not enough supply. So this is the issue that TransMedics are solving. Actually, this could be over double if TransMedics actually step in. In the US, you have to go to a certified transplant center. There's 250 of those. So if you do the 40,000 divided by 250 divided by 365, like the average facility is doing one transplant every 2 days, or they're doing 0.44 a day. So some of these facilities are quite small, some of which are bigger. The turnaround time for a machine is about a day, roughly. It could be longer depending on the operation, but they should be able to turn it around relatively quickly if the organ transplant center have not got much else to do. So I'm just going to say the average transplant clinic needs 3 machines, some of which is going to be much more, some of which is going to be much less. I say 3 because medical system is always stretched and these machines are incredibly expensive. So I imagine some of them would be tight. But given that the average is only doing one transplant every 2 days, I'm saying that the average probably has one lung, one heart, one liver. If they're doing more transplants, they've probably got a few of each. But let's just say 3. That would mean that if the depreciation is 10 years, they're going to sell, that means this needs to be 75. So let's say, okay, the average clinic needs 3 machines, and there's 250 certified transplant centers, meaning TransMedics, 750 machines are going to be needed. The average depreciation on them is 10 years, meaning if they sell 75 a year, you're basically talking 18 million just of sales of the machines every year, right? So that multiplied by the 75 machines that you sell. Actually, the single use case for all of these 40,000 transplants is so much more. This is where like they really smash it in terms of TAM. All of that recurring revenue from single use case. You know, the NHS again gave a rough estimate of this, and I think with inflation and high costs in the US, this is kind of crazy. This is where they tend to make a lot of money. And also a lot of money is made off because it's by use and 40,000 transplants are needed, you could make over $1 billion a year from logistics and transportation. So like when you add this together, the total TAM in the US, it could be upwards of 3 billion. And that's good because the company still, their revenue is not that much. Have I got the revenue on here? I don't, but their most recent annualized gross profit was this. Their most recent annualized revenue would be in about the 300 to 400 million range. So it's a 10x on this, just from the US, which is good. And about 25% of the world's organ transplants are in the US. I know the US is like 5% of the world's population, but 25% because it's a developed country, these things can be facilitated. They've got, very, very good specialized healthcare. So 25%, but that will probably go down as the rest of the world develop. But let's just put the global TAM at about 11 billion. So there is a big TAM. There's a big TAM. I was concerned about this to start with. I'm just telling you my thinking, my real thinking. I was concerned about this TAM because you've only got 100,000 that are actually done worldwide. 100,000 transplants, which is crazy. It's not very much. But there are 40,000 needed for the US for heart, lungs, and liver, which is good. And worldwide, you're going to need way over 100,000 for these 3. So the actual demand is there, and this shows me that if it is 11 billion a year, again, it's probably going to be slightly less because the US, they're just going to be able to charge more. The healthcare facilities are going to be able to afford it. So like even if this TAM was say 7 billion, that's still a lot on current revenue of 400 million. Now, the thing is that their current international revenue is only 23 million. And what would stop me buying the stock right now, and where I need more information and more data, and I'll show you this in a minute, is Europe and Australia and all of these international countries. TransMedics have been focused heavily on the US, and the TAM is there because the TAM is like, it's over or almost 10x their current revenue based on these numbers. But the issue is that these numbers are based off TransMedics doing every single organ in every transplant facility with no other technology approved, no other cold storage, like everything going to plan. Remember, this number, 18,200, is the actual number of transplants that are actually done in the US. 40,000 is the demand. It's not the supply of transplants. So I've actually got some quite optimistic numbers to just say, TransMedics are going to be in every transplant facility in America. They're going to be doing every single organ transplant, every single use case. They're going to have this 50,000 recurring revenue. And this is where I start to hesitate a little bit about buying the shares right now, is that in Europe, they've not taken off that much. And basically what is happening is the revenue is just ballooning in the US. And this is what you got to remember. They're doing 400 million a year at the moment, but that's because this adoption is extremely high right now. It's all the adoption right now. It's not that they're just selling the 75 a year right now, and it's like steady depreciation, and every year 10% of them are going to be depreciated. It's like, no, mass adoption is now. So there might be a bit of a big boom in revenue, and then their revenue may be affected a little bit, but then on the other hand, the bulk of it seems to be that it will come from the logistics and the single use case. And this is another reason why TransMedics bought the airline and why I decided to dress as a pilot. So I have absolutely no doubt about the global TAM of TransMedics Group. They clearly have it. My point being is that those assumptions were like, TransMedics is going to take the whole market, be in every care facility. No one else is going to come along. No one's going to use cold storage. The amount of organ demand for transplants is going to stay the same or increase, which it probably will. But you understand this is like depending on 100% market share. And if there's one type of company that can get 100% market share, it's something like this, where they've spent 20 years behind the scenes building a product that emulates the human body, right? Like, who is the most respected in our societies? Doctors are incredibly well respected. There's many reasons for that, but a big reason is the complexity and intricacy of understanding a human body. Incredibly difficult, right? Even without you're saving people's lives and you're helping people in the community, doctors are very well respected because medicine as a study, as a practice, is incredibly tricky because of how complex the human body is. So this is what we've got to remember for TransMedics, is that, you know, they spent 20 years building this, FDA approved. There's not going to be 10 companies that all come along and have 10% market share, but you never know. Maybe there's going to be some iteration in technology. Whilst TransMedics, you know, is focused on building its airline, maybe one of the big guys comes out and finds something in the long run. Anyway, I'm not concerned about the international TAM. What I am concerned about is, whilst they've proven that they can basically take off in the States, as they've literally done, you know, their revenue sort of stagnant, and then December 2022, boom, December 2023, boom, and this isn't even December 2024, it's just the last 12 months, and they're only up to Q2. So their revenue for the full year is going to be 400. The problem is that, you know, you look at the international revenue, which is in blue, it's just not really taking off yet. They're really focusing on the States, and what I want to see in their results before I'm comfortable with investing is I just want to see some real financial concrete evidence that they can do this, because TransMedics, it was approved in the EU in 2011. Now, obviously individual countries have got their own individual regulations, but it seems like adoption outside of the States has been really, really tricky. And, you know, they've got approval in the US, in Canada, they've been involved in programs in Canada, they've got approval in Australia as well, but this revenue is just not really it. Given the global problem, they need to get through these regulatory challenges. And they said this on the earnings call, is that they said hopefully this will start to materialize in 2026. We need to see that coming through. So this is my main answer, is have another look at this revenue breakdown. You've got the US growing like mad, and in all the other countries, you've got lung is just starting to take off. You've got heart, which is just starting to take off, and liver is not really there. Like, liver should overtake. But I mean, look, it went from 2022, 90,000. Yeah, 90,000. 90,000, that's crazy, to 104,000. It's just really, really not that much of an increase and not that much money. You know, it's like they've been selling like a machine. You know, they're selling the heart ones, they need to be selling the liver ones. So I would want to see more concrete TAM in the rest of the world. Here's a discounted cash flow that actually illustrates their amazing growth. And this 443 million that's now forecasted, when I did my DCF and I was looking at the analyst estimates a few months ago, this number was literally like 350. So you plug it into a basic DCF and you say, okay, the long-term gross margins at the moment, their targets are about 65%. That's dropped off a little bit, understandable when you buy an airline, right? But they're looking to get the mid-60s is their target. Yeah, this growth, obviously very, very good numbers. When you plug this into a DCF at 9% WACC, which is what I usually do, 12.5% long run growth rate after the 10 years, you get a present value of 138. The current shares are around about 170. So you can actually do it. You can actually say, if this adoption goes, it's crazy. Now, I think what we need to look at as investors, because the stock's very expensive, whether you look at it on PE, price to gross profit. I mean, they're not optimized for PE, so don't look at that. But price to gross profit and price to turnover, you'll see that the multiple has expanded a lot. The share price has gone up a lot. If the multiples were lower and this DCF was better, I would consider it right now. But what I'm hoping for in this stock, and this is my strategy, don't copy me, not financial advice, is I want to see more sustained growth in Europe. This stock has got extremely interesting economics, so it's worth paying attention to. I will want to see sustained growth and actually just a bit of a takeoff in Europe and in the rest of the world. I keep saying Europe because that's the big market. Canada, small population. Australia, small population. EU, 400-ish million people, right? The same as the States, and an even more aging population than the States. So we want to watch Europe, and if they can do it in Europe, where the TAM is the same as the US, then it will prove that they're over this sort of regulatory hurdle. Reimbursements is a big issue in the EU, so we've got public healthcare systems in these countries. These national healthcare systems want to know that if they buy a TransMedics machine, that they get reimbursed. The regulation is just a bit slow, and it's sad because these machines save lives and it is needed, but the revenue just hasn't taken off there. So that is the key. That's what I'm watching quarter by quarter. I'm not buying now, but I am watching this company because if they get it right, they could be a $100 billion company. You know, if they can really make this 11 billion-ish revenue a year, plus if they expand into new things and they're still growing from that, price to sales of 10, potentially, maybe 50 billion. But I mean, look, the stock's at 5 billion market cap right now, right? So there is a potential 10 bag opportunity here, but I just don't want investors to get too ahead of themselves where it's like, whoa, 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 it's growing US. A lot of that is just because you've got the adoption, and you want to make sure that that actual growth, once they're up and running and all of those recurring revenue streams have already been incorporated into the US growth, that they can actually not only just have that recurring revenue in the US, but expand into the new markets in Europe and hopefully get FDA approval for the rest of the world. So I'll keep you posted on TransMedics Group. I'm going to do an update where I really delve into where they are trying to get FDA approved, what's the revenue growth looking like in Europe, and from there, I would consider maybe purchasing the stock. The other thing is that if the share price comes down, it's better risk reward. You know, if it trades sideways for a bit and we see great sustained growth, then the ratio looks a bit better, then I'll see it. But the big key is, can they pull off what they've just done in America with the rest of the world? And if they can, this stock potentially has huge potential and blue skies ahead. Hope you enjoyed the video.